long ball. It's going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. It's another victory pod. I am your host, Anthony Joki, and as always, I'm joined by my fantastic co-host of the North Coast Sports, Jack McCurry. How you doing today, Jack?
Doing well, man. It's Victory Monday because we're carrying over from Saturday and Sunday, but it damn sure feels good to be talking about another Browns win. How you doing, man?
Absolutely. You know, a victory has carried on through a couple days now, and you know it's nice to have a Victory Sunday and then a Victory Monday. I guess tomorrow will be Victory Tuesday up until we play again next Sunday. But anyway, we're here to talk Browns with you. We're going to break down this game for you. I don't know if we'll get into much of the head coaching stuff at the end of the show or not, but we might talk about it a little bit. But let's get started. I'm breaking this one down. And the Cleveland Browns beat the Denver Broncos in Denver on primetime football Saturday night, 17-16. And obviously, when you look at this game, Jack, it wasn't a huge performance by Baker Mayfield, but he did more than enough to win this football game on Saturday night, and he made the throws when he needed to, especially early on in the first half there. He struggled quite a bit, but in the second half he seemed to put things together and really made some key throws, especially that touchdown to Antonio Callaway, which eventually was the game-winning score. So how do you look at how Baker performed on Saturday night in primetime football, with it being his second game in primetime football this season?
I thought he was very average. I mean, that first half, the start of the game, it was awesome. That throw to Perriman for the touchdown was an absolute dime. Credit to Baker and credit to Perriman for hauling that catch in. But then, like, the rest of the first half, Baker was missing a lot of throws, and I know a lot of people were saying, like, maybe it was the altitude in Denver, being in that thin air, that maybe his throws weren't as pinpoint. And, it was clear it was. And I had seen Dustin Fox say, Bernie Kosar said it takes a few days to get adjusted into that air. And obviously the Browns went out there early, but maybe they didn't go out early enough to get adjusted. And I think it showed. But in the second half, I think they made adjustments, and Baker showed a lot in that second half. He had a turnover after that long drive to start the second half. He fumbled, but other than that, I thought he was solid in the second half. And it reminded me a lot of the Houston game. Of course, Baker didn't go crazy in the second half throwing, but he was smart. He took care of the football besides that fumble. And then early in the fourth quarter, he saw something on the Denver defense, and he made an adjustment. And a lot of people have pointed it out that he made that adjustment and was able to strike on it with that touchdown to Callaway that eventually won us the game.
Talk about that interception there at the end of the first half, because obviously, you're pretty much in field goal range already, and I apologize for the dogs barking in the background, but you're in field goal range and you have to take care of the football, and it was pretty much a careless throw, trying to throw that into tight coverage, and at that point you really want to walk away with points, and not turn the football over is not exactly what you want to do there.
Exactly. It was very reminiscent to the Houston game where Baker took a shot down the field and threw an interception, and it was like, I know Baker was struggling, but it just sometimes he forces throws too much, and I think it was a tie game at that point. I think it was 10-10, and forcing a ball like that down to the end zone. First of all, Landry had no separation on the defenders, and he threw it into double coverage, and that's just a recipe for disaster. And it wasn't just the only throw. Baker was forcing a lot of throws in that first half when he could have checked down to Duke or Chubb and gained some yardage in extended drives. But, like Baker's not a finished product yet. Just because he's having this monster rookie season, a lot of people want to, proclaim him as an elite quarterback, a top 10 quarterback in the league, and he's still going to make his mistakes and he still has room to grow. But, Baker's got to learn he can't make forced throws like that, whether it's a close game or the Browns are blowing it out, because that's how turnovers happen.
There's also a throw there on that long drive in the third quarter where he fumbled. I want to say it was right before the fumble, actually. Jarvis Landry was wide open underneath it, and he did not see him. And it would have been a first down, and he probably wouldn't have fumbled. But, those are throws that in time Baker Mayfield will see. There were multiple times, which you alluded to, that there were other guys open, and he didn't see them. So I'm sure watching the film yesterday and today, he'll see those throws, and, he'll make sure that those don't happen again, because there were quite a few receivers at various times that were wide open, and Baker just did not see him. Let's talk a little bit more about the offense here, and we'll talk about specifically one of the throws he did make, and that was the touchdown pass to Brashad Perriman on the opening drive of the game to put him off 7-0. That was a hell of a throw by Baker Mayfield, but it was an even better catch by Brashad Perriman. And, we've talked about Perriman quite a bit over the last few weeks, that he's been pretty consistent. And, he hasn't had an issue that he had in Baltimore that I still will not mention until it surfaces, and hopefully it doesn't surface. But, he's played really well. Do you think that Perriman has absolutely locked up a spot on this roster for next season if the Browns are able to re-sign him, because he is an unrestricted free agent due to the fact that the Ravens declined his fifth-year option for next year?
Absolutely. I mean, and he talked about it today with the media that, he feels comfortable here. He says the future's bright here and he wants to be a part of it. And you could just see, and I will admit, I was a critic of Perriman and the signing at the time. I did not like it. He didn't prove anything in Baltimore, and I thought there was other options out there that were better than him. But he's come in. The Browns haven't asked him to do a lot, and do what he does best, and that's go down the field, because he's a burner. And when you look at him, you see why he was a first-round pick. The size, his 4.2 speed, and I mean everything. Baker trusts him, and when Baker throws him the ball, Perriman makes a play. And you weren't sure if he was going to do that when we brought him in, but Baker trusts him, and Perriman knows if the quarterback trusts me, I gotta live up to my end of the bargain, and he's done that so far. He's made some great catches, made some big time plays. That touchdown on Saturday night was a beauty. Like I said, Baker made a great throw, Perriman made a great catch. Dorsey needs to be talking to his agent right now, and not just him. I would be talking to Greg Robinson as well. I mean, it's just, you got to get these guys locked up. You can't let them get away, because I think they could be a part of what's going on here now and into the future for the Browns.
No, I think, and I'm going to have to do a little more looking into this, but I think they could put an exclusive rights tag on him, and that way they could match whatever. But I would have to double check that. I don't know if there's a number that goes with that or not. But looking at Perriman, he's a guy that's 6'3". He's performed really well. I don't know if he's a true number one, which is what this team really needs. He's a nice piece that fits in. And, in terms of the issue that he had before he got here, I wonder if Jarvis Landry has something to do with that, because we all know how hard Jarvis Landry works. So I'm curious if Perriman has picked up Landry's work ethic, the work ethic that has been well known, that Landry has made well known to everybody. And I wonder if he's taking extra shots at the drugs machine after practice, doing something to get rid of that issue that he had when he was in Baltimore. And so far he's caught 11 of his 17 targets that have been thrown at him, and he hasn't dropped one yet that I can tell. So it's nice to see that he's resurrected his career here, and hopefully they can sign him to a multi-year thing just to keep him around, because I think he's absolutely proven himself in that sense. when you look at the rest of the offense, Nick Chubb had 100 yards in this game on 20 carries, and he's closing in on 1,000 yards as a rookie, basically only starting half the season so far, and he has 860 yards through, I want to say it's 9 games that he was really participating in. Jack, when you look at Nick Chubb, what has he been able to, or how has he been able to be so successful, behind an offensive line that really struggled early but has seemed to pull it around a little bit? What makes Nick Chubb so successful as a running back?
I think it's the fact that he keeps his feet moving, and you've seen it some carries where the defensive lineman will gang up on him, and he just keeps moving his feet, and he'll push those linemen with him to get those extra 2 or 3 yards. And I mean, that's what's so great about him. And it's also great that the coaching staff doesn't give up on him, and they don't abandon the run in situations, unlike his predecessor or the preceding coaching staff. Case in point, Saturday night, I think he had 47 yards and 14 carries, which was about 3.5 yards per carry. And they went to him in the fourth quarter or on that late drive and said, "We're going to feed you the ball." The first run, he ripped off 40 yards. And then, they kept feeding him. It said as they marched into the red zone. Obviously, the drive halted, and they didn't put any points on the board. But, they kept feeding Chubb, and he kept giving them those couple yards every time he got the ball. And that's what's so great about Chubb. And it's so great that the Browns were able to pick him up at the top of the second round. And I keep saying, people wanted Saquon Barkley, but, the case was made again that you can find big-time running backs in the later rounds of the draft. Well, you don't have to get them at the top of the draft. And sure, Barkley is a stud. There's no doubt about it. But to focus in on other top positions of need and top prospects with the first and fourth pick, like we did with Baker and Denzel, we were able to go at the top of the second round, still get a premium running back in Nick Chubb, and he's panned out. I mean, he's been on a tear the last 7-8 weeks since he's been able to take over as a starter, and it makes everybody forget about Carlos Hyde and the fact that we still have another playmaker like Duke Johnson as well. It's just that Chubb has completely taken over that running back position.
And for what it's worth, Carlos Hyde was inactive yesterday. And to prove your point even more, on the other side of the football, or on the other side of the field, you have Philip Lindsay, who's had a heck of a season. He didn't have a great game on Saturday night, but he was an undrafted free agent guy. You can find running backs anywhere in the draft. If they're talented, teams are going to find them, and they always seem to perform. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. This defense only gave up 1 touchdown. They forced the Denver Broncos to kick 3 field goals. I want to say this is 2 weeks in a row now that they've only given up 1 touchdown on offense. So when you look at this defense, they've been playing really well lately, and obviously it's going to translate into wins. What did this Browns defense do to really neutralize the Denver running game, which has been so successful this season?
I think they honed in on it, and they knew that if the running game got going, Case Keenum was going to be his most effective. And you've seen it earlier in the game. Philip Lindsay ripped off some big runs, and then, Case Keenum was able to utilize the play action, which he's one of the best quarterbacks under play action in the NFL. And, once the Browns were able to lock in and stop the run, they held them to 32 yards, which is a phenomenal number. The Broncos offense stalled out, and Case Keenum wasn't able to do his dink and dunk passing game that he was doing on the first half, especially that long touchdown drive when he ended up somehow sneaking past Myles Garrett to get in. But, they stopped the run, and we talked about that on the preview episode. That was a key to the victory. If they can stop Philip Lindsay, who's been unbelievable this year as a rookie, that the Browns were going to have a good chance of winning the game, and they were able to do that. And they were able to force Keenum into making some bad throws. They got 2 interceptions. One was a great interception by Jabril Peppers, who I'm sure we'll expand on here in a moment. But him and TJ Carey, that whole defense played well. Myles Garrett didn't make a big impact, but everybody contributed on that defensive side of the ball. And they've been playing really good. Like, no one's talking about it. They had hiccups against Kansas City and Houston, but they're really good teams. But, since the coaching change and since Blake Williams has taken over as defensive play caller, the defense has been better than they were under Gregg Williams, which is kind of crazy because Gregg Williams has been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah, it's really nice to see this Browns defense really perform well. And, they struggled against a couple good teams. And you're going to have weeks of that. You're going to have weeks where you struggle when you're facing really good opponents. That's just how the NFL is. But to only hold the Denver Broncos to 1 touchdown, force them to kick 3 field goals. And this is back-to-back weeks where the Browns defense closed out another football game. This Browns defense has, and even going back to the Jets game too, early in the season, this Browns defense has closed out a lot of football games. And, it's nice to see that. There have been a lot of times over the years where, the Browns defense has absolutely failed them, and other teams have, come back and won a football game. And, the confidence is starting to build. I think in the fans, there are a lot of fans that wait for the other shoe to drop. And I'm sure when the Browns didn't get that 4th and 1 play, they knew that Denver was going to go right down the field and kick a field goal to win the game, and that just didn't happen. I had the same feeling against Carolina last week. When Carolina got that ball back, I'm like, there's no way they're going to score. There's no way they're going to score a touchdown and win that game, and they didn't. So I think the defense is playing with a lot of confidence. It's definitely instilling a lot of confidence in the fans, and I like that we have a rabid defense back there, that a real ball hawking defense.
I just want to add this in real quick. Since the coaching changes, the Browns have only allowed 4 touchdowns offensively in the second half of games since the coaching change. So the last 6 games, they've only allowed 4 touchdowns. So that's just, they make the right adjustments in the second half. In 3 of those games, they've only allowed 6 points or less in the second half. So that just shows you that, this coaching staff has these players buying in. They're going out, implementing a game plan, adjusting to the game plan and what the opponent's offense is doing, and they're showing out and they're balling. And that's why I think more and more that this coaching staff needs to stay in place. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but like, the defense is playing almost lights out. The offense has been balling. This team is on such a roll right now. It just makes me wonder if this coaching move would have happened earlier in the season or end of last season, what this team could be at right now instead of what they're at right now. But it's still been a great run that they're on right now.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about one of the players that has been such a crucial part of this defense, and that is Jabril Peppers. A lot of people, last year as a rookie, he did not play extremely well, but this year has been an incredible sophomore season for him. I'm tired of hearing the Michigan takes that go along with him, from all the Browns fans that are also Buckeye fans. But when you look at Jabril Peppers, this guy is really living up to his first-round selection. And to have a guy in that secondary who could pretty much do it all, which is, what they use him for at Michigan. I kind of compared him to a young, I compared him to Troy Polamalu. He's a guy where you could send him all over the football field, and you could see his versatility in the game on Saturday night, coming up with that fantastic interception at the end of the first half, and then on the final defensive play of the football game, coming up with that monster sack. Peppers can be all over the football field, and it is crucial that the Browns have a guy like that. And just talk a little bit more about how you see Jabril grow over the course of this season.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. We touched on it. People want to look at the box scores, and then that's how they want to judge a player. And if you do that, you're just a lazy football fan. I'm sorry, that's point blank. It's what it is. If you watch the game and then you go back and watch it again, when people tell you, hey, this guy's making an impact, and you watch that guy closely, you'll see he's making an impact Myles Garrett's like that, and people disrespect him, and it's ridiculous. And Jabril Peppers is like that. You know, time and time again, I said it last year, Jabril Peppers wasn't a free safety, but Gregg Williams put him there because they didn't have a free safety. When they traded for Demarius Randall, that was the best move for Jabril Peppers' career, because then he was able to go back into the strong safety position where he belonged, and he has balled out this year. 2 weeks in a row, Pro Football Focus has given him a grade of 90 or better. This week, he's the top-ranked safety in football. And I think for the entire year, he's the 6th best safety in football, according to Pro Football Focus. Everybody was wondering what his position was going to be in the NFL. He's a strong safety. He can sit back there, give wide receivers and tight ends a hard time, and then, of course, he can come down into the box and blitz and wreak havoc to running backs and even quarterbacks like we seen on Saturday. I mean, the interception was amazing because he covered about 25 yards running across the field to jump in front of Cortland Sutton for that interception. And then Gregg Williams stated today in his Monday press conference that Jabril Peppers made the switch and was able to go in on the blitz and in that wide open hole go after Keenum to seal the win for the Browns. So it's not just Baker that's making audibles on offense. It's guys like Jabril Peppers that are making audibles on defense, and they are cashing in on those mistakes that the Broncos were making, and it's paying off. And it's great to see Peppers balling out. And for the people that want to knock on him because he went to Michigan, get over yourself. You know, that's how people traded Braylon Edwards, and that's why he was nasty to the fans. And Jabril Peppers even called out fans earlier this year about it. It doesn't matter what school they go to. If they ball out for the Browns, who cares what school they went to? They're balling out for the Browns. That's the team they play for now. And if he's a big part of why the Browns are slowly turning this thing around and turning into a legit contender in the AFC.
I saw a ridiculous tweet on Saturday night. I don't even know why I'm mentioning it right now, but this guy said that Browns fans who are also Buckeyes fans should turn in their Buckeye fan card for rooting for guys like Mayfield and Peppers, which is completely the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. You know, it's almost to the point of Stephen A. Smith's Acid 9, Acid 10, Acid 11. That is one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever heard. If these guys play well, I don't care where the hell they play college football at. They're Cleveland Brown, and they play for this team in this city. That's all I care about. Looking at this defense, we mentioned how well they performed on that last drive in sealing the victory for the Browns, and they were able to get that, or they had to do it because the Browns and Gregg Williams decided to go for it on 4th and 1. I want to say they were at the 10-yard line. They needed to get 1 yard to the 9-yard line. If they would have got that 1 yard, the game would have been over. The Browns would have clinched that one. They would have been able to run the clock out. However, the Browns did not get it. It was a 4-yard loss on a play for Nick Chubb. Are you okay with Gregg Williams deciding to go for it in that situation instead of kicking the field goal? If they would have kicked the field goal, the Broncos still would have had to score a touchdown in that case.
No, I didn't mind it at all. I thought the play call was wrong. I thought they should have either done a QB sneak type of situation or punching it right up the gut with Chubb. It seemed like they were doing like a counter or a toss situation. But I like the aggressiveness. We've seen it from other teams this year. Mike Vrabel down in Tennessee last Thursday, the Chargers going for 2 to beat the Chiefs. I mean, I like the aggressive play calling. I like being bold, and I think Gregg Williams did that because A, he thought the offense could do it, but B, he knew that the defense was going to hold them off, and the Browns were going to win that game regardless. I know a lot of people are saying, well, take the easy points, make Keenum go drive the field for a touchdown. Like we've just been talking about, the way the defense has been playing, there's confidence that they're going to get the job done, and obviously they did. I think some people aren't really Gregg Williams fans, and I can understand it to a degree. There's a lot of things that Gregg Williams still does that I don't like, but guess what? The guy's confident in his football team. He believes in the football team. He's put them in the right situation these last 6 weeks, and the Browns are winning, and he's confident in that. So I'm confident in the decisions he's making. I just wish he would have let the offsides penalty happen instead of calling a timeout, because that would have just sealed the game right then and there. But I love the aggressive approach he brings.
Well, I think he had no way of seeing them jump off sides as he was running down the sideline in that situation. But, too bad Gregg Williams wasn't coaching back in that Oakland game, because he probably would have gone for that 4th and 2 inches that the Browns needed to get to seal that victory back in Oakland. In terms of Gregg Williams, has he done enough in your eyes to make him one of the, a legitimate candidate for head coach to come back next season? I would say, in my case, he's absolutely nailed down at least a top 3 spot in consideration for that head coaching job. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. He is one of the legit candidates for this job. I mean, you look at it, 7 weeks ago when the coaching change happened, I think a lot of us were saying that the season was over with. There was no way that this team was going to rebound from a coaching change. But, Gregg Williams rallied the troops, and not just him. Freddie Kitchens did it. I think some of the players did it. Baker Mayfield. They rallied the troops, and they knew what was in that and inside that locker room and in the organization. They knew that they had some dogs and that they weren't going to lay down like other Browns teams in the past, that they were going to fight those final 8 games. And that's what they've done so far the last 6 games. We went from a 2-5-1 team, and I think some of us were ready to just throw in the season and start moving towards the future. But no, they have rallied the city. They've rallied the organization together, and has to the point where we're still talking playoffs, even though there's a minuscule chance of it happening. And he's changed the culture. I truly believe he's changed the culture in that building. All those young guys have tasted victory, and they keep wanting more taste of victory, and they keep going out and fighting. And I think they're going to continue to go out and fight these last 2 weeks, regardless of the fact that they can't make the playoffs. They want to give Cleveland hope. They've given Cleveland hope, and they want to keep giving them hope in the future. And I think Gregg Williams is a big part in that. And I know a lot of people don't like some of the things Gregg Williams does, what he says. Obviously, Bountygate still hangs over his head. But, it could be that Gregg Williams is just a great leader of men. He might not be a great defensive coordinator anymore, but he's a damn sure good head coach, and he's a damn sure good leader. And I think that if John Dorsey doesn't see it, unfortunately the Haslams do. And I could see a scenario where the Haslams step in and say, John, he's got these guys believing, and he's got these guys winning. I think we should go in the direction where he remains as the head coach. John Dorsey might not like that, and that could create another rift in the organization. But, I mean, John Dorsey's got to see that these guys are playing. His draft picks that Dorsey made, they're producing under Gregg Williams. And, I mean, you got to see, like, the Browns are winning, and he's got to have a legit chance, I think, at head coach. What about you?
I think so. I think next year, no matter who the head coach is, the Browns are, probably projected to really make a strong playoff push. Now, what I want to ask you is, does John Dorsey only have one chance to get this right? So let's say he keeps Gregg Williams for next season. Is that going to be Dorsey's only chance in getting this right? Because if he lets Gregg Williams go, or if he keeps him for next season, but it really isn't working out, and they don't make the playoffs next year, and they really have no shot at making the playoffs. Say they have a similar record this year, like 6-10. Is that going to be John Dorsey's only chance to get this right? Is this offseason the only chance that John Dorsey is going to have in hiring the right head coach for his football team?
I honestly would hope not, because I think, John Dorsey knows who I think he wants to hire for his next head coach. If the Haslams are pushing for Gregg Williams, which I could definitely see just because of the success they've had in the last 6 weeks, that Dorsey might say, okay, we'll let this go. And it could be a scenario where, when Mangini won those 4 straight games when Holmgren stepped in, and Holmgren gave him that other year, I would hope that the Haslams would say, we'll give this a year with Gregg. If it doesn't work out, we'll pay off the remaining contract, and then Dorsey, you can go get your guy. But, I mean, if Dorsey's behind bringing it in and it doesn't work, first of all, next year I would hope Dorsey would step in and say, this doesn't work, let me go get my guy, if he's still available. But then again, if Dorsey's behind it, I mean, it's going to be a black eye on him, and it's going to be a bad mark on his career for letting Gregg Williams be a head coach, and then there's no success. But, I mean, we still got a few more weeks left. We got time to discuss it. I just think Gregg Williams should definitely be a candidate. I mean, not saying he should definitely get the job, but I definitely think he should be one of the top candidates for the job.
Because when you look at it, and tell me if you agree with this too, John Dorsey, at least to me, he only has one chance to hire the right head coach, just as he only had one chance in drafting the right franchise quarterback. And it looked like he drafted the right one in Baker Mayfield. But when you're a general manager in this football league, you really only have the one chance to get the right quarterback, and you have one chance to get the right head coach. Would you agree with that? Yeah,
I would definitely agree. I look at Phil Savage. I mean, he was there 4 years. He hired Romeo Crennel. He drafted Brady Quinn. But then at the end of the 2008 season, Randy Lerner gave Savage hope that he was going to be able to pick his next guy. But then it turned out that Lerner just wiped the slate clean and fired Crennel and fired Savage. Not too many GMs get the chance to hire a second head coach. The only one I can think of was Atlanta. Thomas Dimitroff hired Mike Smith and then was able to hire Dan Quinn. So, yeah, GMs and coaches are kind of usually attached at the hip, so I'm sure Dorsey is still evaluating everything these last few weeks. I'm sure he's going to give Gregg Williams a fair chance because I think Gregg Williams deserves that. But I don't think John Dorsey thought that Gregg Williams was going to do this with this team. But I think now he owes it to him at least to give him an opportunity to be the permanent head coach. And I'm sure he'll get that first interview.
You'll have to remind me, was in Atlanta there, was Dimitroff the one that picked Matt Ryan? Or was he there after that pick?
I believe he was there because I'm pretty sure that he was with Pioli in Kansas City, and then he got the job at Atlanta like the following season.
Well, maybe he got that opportunity to pick that second head coach because he did get that franchise quarterback right. And maybe for John Dorsey's sake, if things don't work out with Gregg, if he's retained, maybe he'll get that second chance as well because he did get that franchise quarterback right for the first time in over 30 years for the Browns. So, they've really been needing one. So, obviously we'll talk about a lot more as we move on towards the end of the season and into the offseason. There was an interesting report that came out Sunday morning with Jay Glazer, and he said that no matter who, and you'll have to correct us if I'm wrong at paraphrasing this, but he said no matter who the next head coach is for the Browns, Freddie Kitchens has absolutely locked up the offensive coordinator role for next season.
Yeah, he was doing his usual shtick on Sunday when he goes through news and notes real quickly, and he said, and I have the quote, it says, "It did lock up the job for offensive coordinator Freddie Kitchens because of the job he's doing with Baker Mayfield. Because they have a coach for Baker, they can open up the search. They don't have to go out and get an offensive guru. They can go out and just find the best guy for the job." He did say that Gregg Williams will be considered, but there has been no guarantee that Gregg Williams will be the long-term head coach. And I think that's fair. And, with Freddie Kitchens, being here and what he's been able to do, and I was talking about this on Twitter today with some people. I said, we have our offensive guru. We have our Sean McVay, and I think it's Freddie Kitchens. I mean, you look at what he's done in the 6 games, 71% completion percentage, almost 1,600 yards, 13 touchdowns, 5 picks with Baker. And the Browns as a whole have averaged 23 points a game, 261 passing yards, and 113 rushing yards per game under Kitchens. I mean, he's completely transformed the offense. Has us talking about guys like Greg Robinson and Rashad Perriman staying on past this season when many thought before that they'd be moved out the door after this season. Kitchens deserves to be the offensive coordinator. My only fear is that Haslam would be involved in that and just pretty much saying, John, whoever you get for head coach, you have to put Freddie Kitchens with them. Me reading this report and listening to that report makes me think that they've talked to head coaching candidates already, or if through backdoor channels, and whoever they bring in as a head coach, they've already said, we're good with Freddie Kitchens just because of the work he's done with Baker Mayfield and what we've watched so far as Baker's season has progressed and how he's continued to get better.
If that's the case, would you say that things have been narrowed down to a defensive-minded coach like Gregg Williams? Because, if you hire an offensive guy, like a Mike McCarthy, they're going to want to run their own offense, and they're going to want somebody that's going to run their own offense. They're going to want to call plays. They're going to want to call the offensive plays. So, to me, seeing that report, that kind of puts me in one direction, that they're going to hire a defensive-minded football coach, whether that be Gregg Williams, whether that be somebody like John Harbaugh if he's not retained by Baltimore or something like that, because they kind of had the same situation down, or it could turn out like the same situation down in Tampa Bay. They had a defensive-minded coach in Lovie Smith, and when things started, when things didn't start to work out with Lovie Smith, they just promoted Dirk Cutter, who was their offensive coordinator, and the guy who really had success with Jameis Winston, to head coach. I could see that situation happening with the Browns and with Baker Mayfield and Freddie Kitchens as well.
Yeah, and that's a fair comparison. I mean, Dirk Cutter has not proven to be a good head coach. He was a great offensive coordinator. See, that would be a scenario where, we talked about, Freddie Kitchens potentially being the head coach of the Browns. And and Benjamin Albright even said it last week when I threw the idea out to him. He said, why would you move a guy who's doing great in a role that he's getting accustomed to and move him into a brand new role that he's never been prepared for? And that's fair. I think Freddie should be the offensive coordinator for sure. I don't think it rules out hiring an offensive head coach because, like I said, if they're talking to potential candidates through backdoor channels right now, and they're saying we're open to keeping Freddie Kitchens just because of the work he's done with Baker, that would just go to show that whoever the head coach is doesn't care about if he's implementing his offensive system. Like, let's just say, for instance, it's Mike McCarthy, and he's one of the front runners for the job. Benjamin Albright told us that last week here on the pod. If McCarthy comes in and says, I'm open to changing my system and, letting Kitchens run the offense that he wants to because it's working with Baker, then that would be a good move because I think McCarthy's a good head coach. And if he's open to expanding his offense and expanding what he wants to do offensively to accustomate for Baker Mayfield, then it's a great move and it's a good hire then. But if, you get a guy like McCarthy in here and who wants to run his offense that he ran in Green Bay, then it's not going to work. So it'll be interesting. I like that they want to keep Kitchens. I just hope that they're not forcing him on a head coach.
You mentioned our playoff chances, and as we wrap up this podcast here, I would think the Browns, you have a better shot at winning the lottery than the Browns do at this point of making the playoffs. What needs to happen is the Miami Dolphins have to lose one of their next two games, and then the Tennessee Titans and Indianapolis Colts have to lose their Week 16 game, and then they play each other in Week 17, and that game would have to end in a tie, and obviously the Browns would have to win their last two games. So the Browns' chances of winning the play or going to the playoffs are, absolutely minuscule at this point. But we've seen some talk on Twitter today saying that the Browns should lose the next two games for draft positions. So, Jack, I give you the floor on this one.
I mean, and I get it. I know a lot of people are disappointed that the playoff discussion is pretty much dead. It disappoints me. I was hoping to roll into Week 17 with at least a chance. But, just to hear people talk about let's lose for draft position, let's rest our guys so they don't get hurt. You're as much a part of the problem of the old Cleveland. Get the old Cleveland Browns discussion and move it off to the side. If you want to go with it, that's fine. we're a new Cleveland. Yeah, we're not in the playoff discussion anymore, but we have a chance to go over 500 for the first time since 2007. Like, I don't know, but we've done everything else this year. We've won games. We broke our road winless streak. We've beaten divisional opponents. We're not going to get swept by a divisional opponent for the first time since 99. I mean, we're not going to lose double-digit games, which is obviously the biggest step in the right direction because we've lost double-digit games like every season except 01, 02, 07, and 14. I mean, we have a chance to go over 500 for the first time in 11 years, but yet there's people that want to get a better spot for draft position. They want to rest guys so they don't get hurt. Gregg Williams would come and kick you right in the C-gap. Or whatever that freaking saying he said. Oh, the C-gap goes right in the testicles. That's what it was. He should send guys into your fucking testicles with the C-gap for that shit. I mean, go out, beat Cincinnati at home, and embarrass Hugh Jackson again. And then if Baltimore still has a chance, week 17, knock them out of the playoffs. Like, that's what I want to do right now. I want to win these last 2 games, ride into the offseason with all the momentum and have every coaching candidate knocking on the door that says, I want to coach the Browns because I see what's going on here and I want to be a part of it. And then I want to knock Hugh Jackson on his ass one more time. And then I want to knock the Ravens out of the playoffs. If you want to talk about draft and you want to talk about resting players so they don't get hurt, go root for Buffalo, as Phil Savage once said.
I think for only the second or third time in this podcast, I'm going to have to censor you when I do my post-editing for the F-bombs. But anyway, I'm all with you with this. I want another week of rubbing it in Hugh Jackson's face. And to knock Baltimore out of the playoffs would be fantastic, even though that would mean the Steelers get in. But, for me personally, when the Steelers play the Ravens, I root for the Steelers because I hate the Ravens that much. But, look, we have plenty of time to discuss draft picks. You've prevented me from doing it so far, and, we're actually going to wait till the end of the season. And I'm not all for that loser mentality, especially with what, Gregg Williams has been able to do in the second half of the season ever since they fired Hugh Jackson. So, I'm not resting guys. I'm not sitting anybody. I'm going for that winning record. And having a winning record after going 0-16 last season is going to be absolutely wonderful. So I'm all for it. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we get out of here?
Nope. We covered everything, and I'm done ranting.
Okay. Yes. And thankfully, I'm done censoring, too. So go ahead and plug everything you need to plug.
As always, follow me on Twitter at jmccurrycle. Check out my site, thenorthcoastsports.com, for all the latest on Cleveland sports. And check out my other podcast, the North Coast Sportscast. Had an Indians episode last week and hope to do more episodes here pretty soon because we got some things to talk about, obviously, with the Indians, the Cavs, and the Buckeyes, who got the Rose Bowl here coming up in a couple weeks.
I want to, give our listeners a shout out because last week we started putting out these videos on Facebook that kind of highlight. We put them on Facebook and Twitter that kind of highlight certain segments of our show, and they've had great success so far. So I really appreciate you guys watching those and listening to our podcast as well. We had a great week last week in terms of downloads, so thank you guys. As you all know, and for those that don't know, you can find our podcast on pretty much any platform that you can think of, including iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. Be sure to follow our social media on Facebook and Twitter at 1085 Gridiron. You can follow me personally at Anthony Joki over on Twitter as well. We appreciate you guys following us, and if you guys would subscribe to our podcast, we'd appreciate you even more. Be sure to subscribe, like, review a podcast, and with all that, we're going to get on and out of here. This is another 1085 Victory Pod in the books, and hopefully we'll be back later in the week to preview the game against the Cincinnati Bengals. And hopefully next week we're having another Victory Pod as well. But until then, and as always, go Browns.